Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning. Welcome to Everything Co-op. This week, or this month, we're celebrating the National Women's History Alliance, which theme for the month is Moving Forward Together, Women Educating and Inspiring Generations. And to talk about this subject this morning, we have Jessica Nembhard on with us and Ahzjah Simons. Good morning, ladies.
Morning. And it's Ahzjah Simons.
Ahzjah. Ahzjah. Okay. Okay. That's why I normally call her L.A. But I'll keep trying Ahzjah until I get it. Okay. So let's start out with Dr. Nembhard. Can you tell the audience a little bit about you, where you're from, where you went to school, and about your book?
Sure. Jessica Nembhard. I grew up outside New York City, but have lived most of my adult life as a resident of Washington, D.C. I'm a professor at John Jay, professor of community justice and social economic development, an economist in the Africana Studies Department at John Jay. And I wrote a book called Collective Courage, A History of African American cooperative economic thought and practice. My publisher just reissued the book for the 10th anniversary. So
fantastic.
December 2024. Yeah. I couldn't believe it. They said it was selling so well. They wanted to do a reprint. So I did a new preface to it. So we've got that out there as well. I also want to shout out my mom. Her birthday is tomorrow, International Women's Day, March 8th. She would have been 101 if she was still alive, so I want to remember her.
All right. Shout out to Mom. Okay. And Ellie, a little bit about your background. Where'd you grow up, go to school, and what do you do now?
Congratulations to you again, Jessica. Okay. Yeah, so my family's from the West Indies, Jamaica, West Indies. I was born in Connecticut and lived there for about 30 years, migrated to Atlanta, Georgia. And now I am working in the cooperative space as a co-director for Georgia Cooperative Development Center, also doing some consulting and internal work with illuminate. I am currently president for Digico Global Business Solutions. We're working with women and BIPOC business owners to support digital transformation so they can thrive in the economy today, which is crazy, but very digital. And then I'm working in the media space with International Co-op Media Group to create media projects that help uplift the cooperative model, share great stories, and help us to move forward self-determined.
Fantastic, ladies. Fantastic. I've asked you before, Ahzjah, but how many hats do you wear?
I try to limit it to at least 3 at any point in time. But I'm a woman, so that's what we do.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Three's a healthy number, right? 3's a healthy number.
Well, you got this moving together, women moving together, educating and inspiring generations. And inspiring generations is what women do, and educating our society, our people, our children. Speaking of that, Dr. Nembhard, why do you think women, particularly black women, are so strong and are always educating and inspiring generations to come, the matriarchs of the family? Why do you think that's so?
Well, it's easy and it's complicated. So the easy thing is we do it because we're survivors and we're preservers of the race. We're preservers of humanity. We're the ones in charge of social reproduction. We protect everybody. our families, our communities. So we take that responsibility seriously. I think we also fill in the gaps, especially under oppressive situations. Even when we're oppressed, we're also more invisible, and so we can keep organizing and keep doing things. I know we talked about this, but I forgot another example I can give. I heard about some research that was done by a woman historian who was looking at the mutinies and revolts on slave ships from the passage, that horrible human trafficking passage from Africa to the Americas. And she found out that the only slave ships that had mutinies and riots and rebellions were slave ships that had African women on them. The ships that only had male cargo, didn't have any record of any rebellions. And what she interpreted that to be was several things. One, that unfortunately the women had more access on the ship because they were being used as concubines and raped and that kind of thing. But that meant they weren't always in the dungeons. They knew the layout of the ship. They knew what the captors were doing. And so they had intelligence that could help with the strategy for how to do, right? But that also they were strategists. They had been strategists in their home country. And so that combination of access and strategy, even though they were being just as horribly oppressed, if not more oppressed, but they had access and strategy. And so I would say the same thing once we were here in the Americas, here in the U.S., even when both groups were heavily exploited, we were under the radar more because people didn't expect us to do anything, and yet we were strategists and that kind of thing. And then the final thing I would say is it looks like everybody gets endorphins from cooperating, all human beings do. But it looks like some of the research says that women's endorphins are longer, stronger, and last longer when they cooperate. And so I think also that sense of cooperation, working, helping each other, right? It actually makes us happy, right? Endorphins makes us happy. And so that helps to sustain this hard work, right? It's hard to keep a race alive, to keep people alive, to keep a community going. But the fact that we do it with other people, we have that sense of nurturing, protection, and we stand up when there's a need. We fill in and do it. So those are I don't have a total scientific explanation, but hopefully that gave you a little bit of both theory, science, and sentiment.
Well, it does it for me. That is phenomenal because particularly endorphins, that helps you to be happy. You're happier when you're working together. And I think that's true having played like football through college, that the team spirit it uplifts you, and when you're working together and producing, i.e. winning, it's very, very happy whenever you can work together and win. Yeah, I get that. Thank you. Do you have anything to add, Ahzjah?
I think I would just build on what Dr. Jessica said. I think that we're wired for it. And maybe it has to do with the endorphins. It feels like we're just wired when there is a need, we're either inspired to make a change, or because there's a need, we just sort of rise and make it happen and create something that doesn't exist. It feels like it's part of what we're wired to do. And then, of course, that nurturing side, the nurturing protection side that we're sort of built with as well. We're trying to protect our families. We're trying to protect our children and nurture and make sure that all is good for them. I would also say, this program is about moving forward. One of the things that we do or don't do is take better care of ourselves as we're doing that. Because we just rise and just take care of what needs to be done, we often don't remember to take care of ourselves. And so going forward in the future, that's definitely something that'll be at the forefront of our work, and a priority as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. So do you all have children? Do you find that you're nurturing and supportive and out there fighting for them?
Absolutely. I think that's where I was speaking from when you asked that question. I was thinking about, I have two sons. They're 28 and 26. And I remember just back in the day when I was looking for summer camps, I couldn't find a camp that I thought was really going to feed them and, and create the experience that I wanted for them. And so we were doing all this work in holistic health. And so we created a camp that, offered drumming and arts and culinary arts and spirituality and Tai Chi and meditation and tree climbing and nature and all these things. We just created what wasn't there yet. And so I think that's, what we do as women, and specifically as Black women as well. Out of that need or out of that inspiration, we create what isn't there. And we do it for our kids and our family and our community.
Out of that need, you create. Okay.
Yeah, we create out of need. I have 2 children in their 30s, a son and a daughter, and I have 4 grandchildren. And actually I'm trying to find more balance in my life so I can actually spend more time with my grandchildren and doing things. But I place a high premium on being a member of a family, and especially on keeping engaged with my children and my grandchildren. I have always been involved in their world. Like, I'm not really great at sports, but they both wanted to be in sports and are good at sports, so I was always the manager of the team. Okay. Since I couldn't really coach or didn't think I could coach, so I always was the manager. I was often the class mother and for the classroom. One year, one of my children didn't have a very good teacher, and in fact ended up having 3 different teachers in that year. And we mothers, we just kind of took over and started doing after school programming. We did a book club with the kids, a cooking club, all kinds of ways that we jumped in to make sure that their year was still going to be as good as any other year, even though they didn't, they had such turmoil in their classroom, things like that. So I do think we just take charge when we need to. We step in, we have vision, and we implement it, and we find other women who are going to do it with us. I mean, sometimes we find some good men too, but most of the time it's other women that we find that we can make these things work with and that are willing to put in the time.
Fantastic. And then when I was on PTAs and stuff, a lot of times I was the only man in that role. I never led it, but I would be on PTAs with children. Okay. So I want to talk about, you mentioned the slave ships and the uprising, and women were on there and they were strategists and they had access more so than men. Cruel kinds of ways, but still access. So can you tell us, particularly Dr. Nembhard, with your book and your collection and your research, when you were first on this program about 10 years ago, you had said you had been researching at that time for 15 years, and when you started, people told you that black folks didn't do co-ops. That wasn't what we did. And so you collected enough information to put in a book, and at that time, 10 years ago, you said you keep finding out information. And I guess that's some of the stuff you put in the preface of the book. Yeah, the book it was 10 years ago. The book had just come out when you were on. Okay.
Yep, 2014. Yep.
So tell us in your research, some of the women from the historical perspective that have been moving forward together in this, particularly in the co-op world, educating and inspiring generations.
Yeah, so I guess I was going to say I could start right after the Civil War, but let me not start that far back. Let me start with Maggie Lena Walker in the late 1800s, early 1900s. She took over the leadership of a women's mutual aid association, revamped it, had it headquartered in Richmond, where she was from, and created this extensive mutual aid and then co-op system to do banking and housing particularly, but they also ended up opening a department store, etc. And she was another one who said, women, we just have to work together. We see a need, We got to work together, solve the problem, and then keep moving. And for her, the need was Black folks in charge of commerce, right? So first, it was a penny savings bank, right? Just everybody bring in your pennies and start saving. She was eventually consolidated all the Black banks in Richmond and started the consolidated, oh gosh, I can't remember any of the names anymore, but a bank, and ran it. They needed housing, so they started basically a housing co-op. They wanted a department store because, Black folks weren't allowed to buy in white department stores and were getting inferior products. So again, that notion of you figure out, or not even figure out, you see the needs, you get people to join together. In this case, it started out as a mutual aid association, then became these official, I'm not sure if they were officially co-ops or just mutual aid association owning these different businesses together. But again, most of the board were women, and they moved into each area when they saw a need. They found a way to do it, to solve it together, and moved into that area. So that's one example. Then you've got
But before you move on, can you tell people what a mutual aid society is?
Oh, sure. So mutual aid association is, it's usually an informal, though some of them can become more formalized, organization of people who pool their resources to address a problem. In U.S. Black history, the first mutual aid associations were actually burial associations, which is really interesting unless you know African history and African culture. In African culture, most African culture, burying somebody is just as important as making sure they live properly. And so making sure they're buried face to the west so that their soul can go where it needs to, making sure they're buried with things that they had took pride in when they were alive. And of course, in the U.S., we were enslaved. And so most of the time, if we died, we were just thrown into a pit somewhere. And if we were not enslaved, if we were free, it was very hard to pay for the proper burial. But in the culture, it was really important to honor your dead properly. So people would pool their resources. And then if somebody died and you were a member of the Mutual Aid Society, the pooled money could then be used to pay for that person's funeral, to have the right funeral. They then started having mutual aid for widows and orphans, for health care. So basically you put in dues. In those days, it might be 5 or 10 cents. And then your dues piled up. It's like basically what insurance companies do now. But this was locally controlled, mostly controlled by women. By the early 1800s, most of the Black mutual aid associations, 60 to 80% of them were run by women, and mostly women. But we did have mutual aid that were co-ed. But the idea was you satisfy a need by pooling your resources, everybody putting in what little they have, and then everybody having access to the pooled money when they need it.
Okay. Thank you for Magdalena Walker.
Yes.
Who else?
So that's Magdalena Walker. And actually, if we want to keep on the mutual aid theme, the other person who actually came out of mutual aid and then became a very strong co-op educator and leader in the 30s and 40s would be Helena Wilson with the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. She was the wife of one of the leaders of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters in Chicago. She started the first and ran the Ladies Auxiliary for about 30 years. And one of the projects she had for the Ladies Auxiliary for the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters was to do co-op education and to start co-ops. The idea that she and A. Philip Randolph had, who, as we know, is one of the co-founders of the Brotherhood, was that it was not good enough just to have union wages, but what do we do with the union wages, right? So now that Black folks had a chance to be middle class, had union wages, we need to spend it in the Black community and not just spend it on capitalists and in capitalist ways, but spend it in collective ways. So Helena Wilson wrote in the masses of the Black Worker magazine that the Brotherhood put out. She wrote about cooperatives. She started 17 study groups to study cooperatives and consumer education. And she helped to start a credit union, a buyers club that was hoping to be a co-op grocery store. She argued that junior achievement programs should be teaching cooperative economics, not capitalism. And so for about 40 years, she was leading their organization to make sure people understood that co-ops were what helped to keep resources circulating in a community, and that using their good union wages to support other community activity and to buy from other black co-ops and other black groups was the most important thing that families, union families, could be doing. And she started out her career as the head of a mutual aid society before the Brotherhood started, and before her husband became a sleeping car porter, and before she started the Ladies Auxiliary. She was already in a mutual aid association, a leader of it, and so she understood that power of cooperation, power of sharing both resources and ideas, and the importance of study groups. She was another one. As I said, she started 17 co-op study groups throughout the chapters of the Brotherhood around the country and in Montreal and Toronto. That's why it was called the International, actually, Brotherhood, because it also operated in Canada. And then...
Okay, I got study groups, the power of working together in cooperation, the power of pooling your resources, no matter how little the resources are, whether it's a penny or nickel or dime, whatever it might be, then everybody pools it, and then pools the skills, the knowledge. Working together can solve problems. And that's what, through the churches, 10% thing, that's what a lot of churches started, the black colleges and universities. So it's just pooling resources and working
process.
Together.
Yep.
Okay.
And
you talk about somebody else.
The oldest economic system in history, right? The way that human beings first made it in this world is by pooling resources, cooperating, sharing. Yeah. And so black women have just we keep it going throughout history. We just keep doing it.
So I heard you mention Ella Jo Baker when I interrupted you. I'm sorry for that.
That's okay. So I also wanted to mention Ella Jo Baker, who from the 1930s was also a big cooperator, co-founder with George Schuyler of the Young Negroes Cooperative League. She was the executive director of the Young Negroes Cooperative. She also made sure the Young Negroes Cooperative League was an organization of young black folks under 35 to promote cooperatives, to start cooperatives. And so they had a strategy of creating local chapters throughout the U.S. She would go around and go to each chapter, either help a chapter to start, or once a chapter was there, to go and help them explain how to start a co-op, do co-op training, etc. She also had a newsletter where she wrote about how to work, why we should be in a co-op, how to start a co-op. The Young Negroes Cooperative had annual conferences. The first one in Pittsburgh in 1932 during the Great Depression had 600 attendees.
Wow.
Young black people who all wanted to talk about and learn about co-ops, just a phenomenal. And Ella Baker made a speech about the role of black women in the co-op movement in 1932. So she was already thinking about the power of women, the power of education, how important it is. Their second conference was in Washington, D.C., so again, this notion that we all need to come together, work together, study together, learn together, and do together, right? So again, the Young Negroes Cooperative League had a whole strategy, right? We start with bringing people together to talk about these and study cooperation, then start a consumer co-op, either a grocery store or a credit union or something, then connect with other groups who are doing the same thing. They had a notion of small co-ops in different cities and rural areas, then connecting with regional co-op suppliers and things like that. So they had a whole sort of co-op commonwealth vision that started with co-op advocacy and co-op education through, as I said, newsletter articles, trainings, and conferences.
Fantastic.
Yeah, all during the Great Depression.
Well, it seems like Ella Jo Baker used co-ops to help bring us out of the Great Depression.
Yes.
It was very much in the politics at the time, and in our culture, in the culture. we're going to have to take a break, but Dr. Nembhard, do you have any understanding why there was so much activity in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and then there was a time where there was no, at least I didn't hear anything in my growing up about co-ops in the 50s and 60s?
So I have like 30 seconds, so I'll say two things. One is definitely I found cycles of co-ops, and some of it had to do with necessity, people using co-ops during necessity. Some of it had to do with using co-ops as a part of our pride and demanding our self-determination and control over our own resources. Some of it did coincide with when there was federal and state supports, like during the FDR period, there were supports of co-ops. And at every period, I found repression and terrorism against blacks doing co-ops. In some periods, that repression and terrorism was stronger than other periods. But there was never a period of time when we didn't have any co-ops. There were just periods when we had more.
Okay. Listen, we're going to take our break, but when we come back, Ahzjah, I want to get you to talk more about what's happening now in this world. The both of you, but I want to start with you to talk about what women are doing today to create education and inspiring generations coming forth. We'll be right back. Please don't touch that dial. We're back. Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes, and the program is Everything Co-op. We have two guests on today, Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembhard and Ahzjah Simons. We're talking about moving forward together, women educating and inspiring generations, celebrating Women's History Month. These are the first folks that we have on to talk about it. And National Co-op Bank has been our main sponsor these 11 plus years now. We're in our 12th year. NCB's mission is to support and be an advocate for America's cooperatives and their members, especially in low-income communities, and that fits a lot of our communities. So we could reach out to them to get financial support. So we spent the last half an hour talking about history and women's role, particularly black women's role in this co-op world, and why black women step up. Ahzjah, I'd like to now talk about black women today, what black women are doing today, and to educate and inspire generations to come. I know you two ladies had a podcast. What was that podcast about?
Yes, thank you. We had a podcast called Women in Cooperation and subtitled Her Story in Black. And it was really designed to celebrate women, black women in the cooperative space historically, as well as those making history today, to unify us, to amplify those voices, but really to make it a celebration. And we came together and talked about how we might do that. We celebrated women historically, some of the names that Dr. Jessica shared with me. We brainstormed who we would have on, and then we also had women on who were making history today. And women like Iyofolola Omobola.
What's her name again, please?
Iyofolola Omobola, who is an activist and poet and creator alongside Operation Jackson and just a host of more contributions. Ahzjah Ipateo. We spoke with Shirley Sherrod. We spoke with Karen Washington. Dara Cooper helped us to coordinate some of that. And so we really wanted to pay homage to some of the women historically and lift their stories up and get their wisdom and insights. And then we also spoke to a lot of the women who were making history today, like Rodano Redmond, Gabrielle Davis, Lakeisha Woods, Asada Richards, Mona Jenkins, Lene Gilbert Williams, Abiodun Henderson, Jamila Medley is on deck, Tamala Blaylock, Alana Hines, and so many more. And so this is an effort to, again, tell their stories, specifically starting with Black women, and also beyond the celebration, also gathering as a community to figure out what we do next and how we do it. And also leaning into the aspect that I talked to earlier about care. In general, co-ops, I think I had heard when I was learning about co-ops, they were really designed and based on love and compassion, and basically care. And so as we move in this group of women in cooperation, it really is about celebrating and amplifying, but also beyond the celebration, caring for ourselves, caring for each other, and caring enough to take responsibility for our own care, so that we can continue to be sustainable and work in these spaces, which are very difficult at times, and continue to thrive. And so really excited about that work, and share anything else you'd like to know about that.
Well, Ahzjah, I do. I know Jamila Medley, Shirley Sherrard. I know about Cooperation Jackson. I've had some of the men on the show, but not the women in that movement. So I'd like to know a little bit about any of them, but particular ones I don't know that you've mentioned. Washington, Kane Washington, or with a Monica. So can you tell me a little bit about where they are and what kind of co-op they're in, or what did you learn from them?
Yes, here in Washington is just a powerhouse and such a rich history of work. I met her again through Dr. Jessica. She was board president at the time of, I think it's Green Co-op.
Green worker cooperatives, in the Bronx. We do development of worker co-ops in green industries among people of color, especially women.
Yes, thank you. And then Ahzjah Ifitero, who was pioneering in the housing co-op space and also health and wellness, moving into that. Mona Jenkins, she stepped up when the call came, even though she didn't plan on it, for creating the supply chain for Queen Mother's co-ops. I can't remember where that's located, but she shared a little bit with us. And Gabriella Davis hosted.
Queen Mother's, do you know where that is, Jessica? Queen Mother's co-op.
I'm trying to remember too. I'm sorry, God, we're getting old. But Gabriella Davis is in Detroit, so she's with Detroit Food, the new Detroit Food Co-op, but also with National Grocers.
National Crop Grocers, yeah, and she.
But
go ahead.
Yeah, where is Mona? I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know why we're blanking out on where Queen Mother's is.
The name has caught me. I've heard it before, but I don't know very much about it. And I'm also looking to get other people on this radio show. All of these people I don't know.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And Lene is also with Detroit. Lene Gilbert Williams, I think she's the board president there.
Yeah, she is. I've had her on the show, so I know Lene.
I wanted to mention quickly that Gabriella stepped up. We had this fun model that we created for the program, which was that we would interview each other. I'd interview Dr. Jessica, and then she would interview the next person. We'd pass the mic. And so we would have the guest interview the next person and continue like that. And Gabriella stepped up. She was one of our guest hosts. And so she began to host different programs of collectives of women having discussions, which was really amazing to see. And also Dr. Jessica Nembhard, seeing her hosting a program was pretty exciting as well.
Thank you.
She did a great job. She was awesome.
Tell them the website so they can listen to these podcasts.
Sure. Let's see. So we've got womeninCooperation.org is a place to learn a little bit more about all the different programs that are happening. We have women.coop, which is sharing a campaign that we have for Women's History Month, so women can lift each other women up. You would just click on the link that says Celebrates and have an opportunity to share something about another woman that you'd like to lift up in the movement. And then we're going to be posting those on our socials and on our websites. And we have a wall of love from last year, so people can take a look at that as well. The women.coop, womeninCooperation.org, and then National Co-op Media is the larger organization that is sort of hosting these different media projects that we're putting forth.
What is the webpage for National Co-op Media?
NationalCoopMedia.com.
Okay.
And that talks a little bit about the broader programs, all the different programs that will be on the network, as well as, the larger ecosystem. So there's different programs that are talking about the larger ecosystem, the legal, there's an accounting program, there's digital programs, just a host of different programs. And but we wanted to pay homage to our women who, have played such a key role in the movement, and then Black women specifically. So we started with Her Story in Black. And you can find the 4-part series on those websites.
So I see on women.coop, they have the Queens of Cooperation, and they start out with Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembhard.
That's right.
Okay.
She was number one. We could not launch this without her. And I have to say thank you and appreciation and just excitement and exuberance, because she was so excited to do this project with us and so gracious. And so we had to start with her. And it was an amazing program. And then she took the mic and started interviewing other folks. And it was an amazing journey we took. We learned so much.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. I was so excited when Ahzjah approached me about it, because it made so much sense for us to do this. And Ahzjah's the right person. You see all the things she's involved in, and she's got the energy and the inspiration. So it was wonderful. It was great being interviewed by her. And she and I actually, I'm not sure I did any of the interviews by myself. I think you did most of them with me.
Ahzjah. I think you did Ahzjah.
Oh, I might have done Ahzjah by myself, right?
Yeah.
Who's a great, a fantastic spirit, a great friend of mine, but also a great woman cooperator. She started the Ella Jo Baker, one of the co-founders of the Ella Jo Baker Housing Cooperative. She's also with me on Grassroots Economic Organizing newsletter. We work together. That's geo.coop. She's also been heavily involved in the worker co-op movement and was on the first board of the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. So she's another one who's just been endless energy, and now she's doing nutrition and wellness and reminding us, as LA says, reminding us of how important it is to take care of ourselves and to eat right, and to, because we've got to be here for the long run, right? We can't, for the long haul, so we've got to take care of our bodies and our minds while we're doing this work.
Vernon, I just wanted to say quickly, the part of the inspiration for this was Dr. Jessica, because I was moving from the co-op space, retail food co-op space, into consultancy and development and education. And that's when I learned about her and started to discover, oh my gosh, there is such a thing as Black cooperation, because I didn't know. I was mostly in white cooperative spaces, and then learning about her work and all the history that she shared and all the women's names that were coming up. It was just so inspiring. And, I knew that I wanted to do something with women in cooperatives, but I didn't know what it was going to look like. And just through my own personal journey of highs and lows and triumphs and challenges, being appreciated, being celebrated, but also being dragged through the mud and really preferring the celebration. But, of course, you take responsibility for your choices and the unintended outcomes, and you get lessons from the challenges. But also, the celebration was amazing. And I thought, everyone should feel this. Everyone should have the opportunity to be celebrated at some point in time. And I had the opportunity, my team celebrated me right after COVID, which was amazing. And then I also had the Cooperative Service Award from CCMA. And you don't do it for those things, but when it comes, it's amazing. And so those two inspirations, Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembhard, her work and just her heart and what she shared and lifted up for us to see. And then, this need of wanting to celebrate others. And then thirdly, after the celebration, how do we take care of ourselves so we can continue to be here for this movement for each other? So I just wanted to add those inspirations on. They're really important.
So I also went to womeninCooperation.org, and it says it's a coaching firm and media platform dedicated to celebrating and uplifting women in the cooperative movement. And then you can listen to her stories in Black series with the Queens of Cooperation, and they have looks like a magazine, and it is Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembhard again. Fantastic.
Yeah, so we want to have articles as well. So there'll be a sort of a digital magazine piece. And those are the pieces you can learn about on the National Co-op Media side, where it's the bigger, broader vision. But yeah, we started with this series.
And I see LaDonna Redmond and Lakeisha Wolf. And is that Audrey Griffin?
Audrey, yeah, we have a program called Diverse Unity. So that's allied, that's all women together, also sharing their stories from some of the consumer co-ops. Audrey Griffin, of course, CPA, has been in cooperation for many years. In fact, I met her when I was just beginning to work at Sevenanda, 20 years ago. And now we're co-directing Georgia Cooperative Development Center together. And so Kate Sassoon, but she was amazing too, talking about conflict transformation. She does a lot of mediation, things like that. And then we spoke with some other women from consumer co-ops. So we've been getting a lot of content and just really learning so much and having a great time. I know we wanted to talk a little bit about some of what we learned, so I'll stop talking because I can keep going and going.
Before we move on things that we've learned, I see at the bottom of this page or something called a Chief Celebration Officer. Who is the Chief Celebration Officer?
That's my title for Women in Cooperation. Just plain and simple. I was just so excited, and just wanted to celebrate. It's a simple thing. Just celebrate. Just celebrate the incremental successes. Every day, one day in 1 month isn't enough for me. I wanted to do this all the time. This is something that, when we look at women and our lives and what we do, we have children, we have babies, we do these amazing things, and then we go to work, and then we do all these other things. And so, just really wanna celebrate that. And if we don't, who will?
Well, I will. I'll celebrate women.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
And it's nothing like getting celebration. I don't know how Dr. Nembhard felt when she was inducted to the Co-op Hall of Fame, but as you all know, last October I was inducted, and I kind of still walking on cloud nine behind that celebration of contributions. And like you said, you don't do it for that. Matter of fact, it caught me off guard and by surprise. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's and then I went to the last webpage that you gave, nationalmedia.coop.com. I think it should be .coop, but anyway, .com.
It will be.
Okay,
that's phase one.
And celebrating women in cooperation, celebrating Women's History Month, which is this month, and Women in Cooperation. So yes, and you've got beautiful pictures of women working together. Neat on. Okay, so those are the 3 web pages. Mm-hmm. And you said that you wanted to talk about some of the things you've learned and some of the progress you've made. So what are some of the things you learned? And let's switch over to Dr. Nembhard. Let's see if you can answer that first and come back to you.
I think what I've been learning, so I learned it, from this historical study and finding such a strong role for Black women as I was looking for Black co-ops and the history of Black cooperation. But then as we started really talking to these women, it brought home to me how important persistence and resilience is. Because every single woman, even the ones that didn't always tell us all their personal stuff, it was clear that there were huge barriers and traumas in their lives that did not stop them. In fact, it might have fueled them to do more. And so I think that's one of the lessons, that no matter how hard, how horrible our lives are, our experiences are, that we find that persistence and resilience, especially in helping other people, doing collective cooperative efforts, doing everyday acts of solidarity, and making our economic systems as fair and just as possible, that actually helps us to survive, but also to prevail. And it gives us both the reasons for why we need to survive and prevail, but it also gives us the hope, the spirit, that we can do this. So that's one thing I want to say, that it came across to me even more, how phenomenal we are in terms of that we can turn the worst things into some of the best things, and that we can keep going, and that actually keep going is actually therapeutic, right? It's not, right. But that we keep going in ways that help other people, not just therapy for ourselves. But in the end, it helps all of us. And then I think...
Let me see if I could add something here. I just had a thought, an explosion over here with everything that you all have been telling me today. And that is that things can be really, really tough, hard, horrible. And women can come together and come up with solutions to the issues. Form in cooperation, working together, as you said, is the oldest way that we have survived through history when we were being chased by the tiger, of how we come together and fight that. But then it's interesting that when you said the research on the endorphins, that even when there's dark space, by coming together, there's a sense of happiness that comes out of this, okay, which could propel us, women and men, to continue to do more, be persistent, be resilient.
Right.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And then the looking forward, that's the other thing I think, and I do want us to hear from Ahzjah, the looking forward too. So, right, we had women kind of look about, how did you get here? Where did you come from? Right. But what's next? What are the courageous conversations we need to have? What are you doing next? And again, to the person, everybody wanted to make sure that we could do this more and better, right? So the courageous conversations were about how to get more resources, how to train ourselves better, how to heal ourselves better and become stronger, and that kind of thing. Nobody said, oh, I want to go retire or rest, right? Nobody said we're done, or I did it all, or, it's over, right? Everybody said there's more we could do, there's more things we could accomplish, there's more people we could bring into this, there's more ways we can heal ourselves, there's more things we can learn together. So that also, that spirit of energy, hope, optimism, I also think was another thing I learned and I see from working with women, observing women, that we're not just fearless, but we just continue to put the energy in, and that's part of that inspiration, right?
Yeah.
Why it's so inspiring, because we just always see how we could do it better or where we could do next, right? We never say we're done.
Well, you're inspiring me. Thank you. Okay. Ahzjah, do you have to add of what you learned or what we can do better?
I think it's just, again, that creative urge that's within us. But one of the things I learned is that, just listening to those interviews, and I went back and listened to them, a couple of them the other day, and what I learned was that we already know the way. When I went back and listened, or even during the interviews, some of these women already know the way. So moving into the future, it's about sort of following them or listening to them or capturing what's already been done. And then the new generation can sort of fill the gaps, just take what has already been built and fill the new gaps, create the new thing that needs to be created. And what I learned was, it's all there. It's sort of a way that they move, a way that they make decisions, a way that they relate to one another, a way that they stand firm and demand respect in a way that's still not too hard, or whatever. It's all the ways they do that. And I remember talking to, I think, LaDonna Redmond and Assata Richards specifically, where they talked about this way that was sort of taught to them in an organic way from the people and women that were around them. And then they began to sort of bring that forward. And I think that's definitely something that the new generation can learn. And lastly, I can remember years ago hearing someone say that this is part of our work as women as well, or as part of our duty, or whatever it is, or just being women, but that the 20-year-old women need to be giving back to the teens and building for the teens. And the 30-year-olds need to be giving back and creating legacy for the 20s, and the 40s for the 30s, and so on. And And I think that's a map as well, a map that's already sort of written for us to just sort of follow, just seeing what the gaps are now, and then moving forward from there. Yeah.
Okay. So, Ahzjah, I got that we already know the way. Can you explain to me? I think I know what you mean by that, but what is the way?
Well,
that we already know.
Yeah, I think, yeah, right. In my head, we already know. I think it's, I would say it's partially, infrastructure is what I want to go to. But this way is less infrastructure. It's more intuitive. It's more organic. It's something that's already built in us, but it's a muscle that I guess we haven't really practiced. It has to do with the cooperation. It has to do with the intuition. It has to do with learning and being open. It has to do with wanting to care for ourselves. It has to do with balance. It has to do with those things that we usually don't lean into. And so maybe we do know the way. It's just remembering the way. Yeah.
And I would say the way is also the one that's modeled by the women we're talking about. The way is cooperating, right? Sharing with other people, respecting each other, sharing with other people, making sure that whatever we do it for the group, right? We're not just doing things for our own aggrandizement, for our own self. So that all the solutions are about pooling resources, working together, sharing, distributing what we do have, creating more, and seeing the world as a world of abundance, right? Because we have energy and creativity to do things together, right? Rather than a world of limitations and scarcity, that we see the world as open to us, especially if we work together, do it together, whether it's farming or finance or education or whatever, right? Working together, doing it together. We see that it works. It lasts longer than when we do it that way. And that having that sense of respect, mutual respect, self-determination really makes a difference. And I think all the women we've talked to, all the women I've studied, that's really, they have that same message. They might have had it in different ways, but it's that same message. We can do it. We can do it together. We're human beings with human rights, and the way to do it together is the way of economic democracy, just societies, right? And we could put, there's environmental stuff in there too. We have women who are really working on food security, farming, making the environment better, but it's all those same principles. We do it with human dignity, with self-respect, with respect for others, with self-determination. And because we're sharing and distributing to everybody so that we all prosper.
Love it.
Amen.
Love it. And I would just say, if you look at the principles of cooperation, it starts out with self-help, help self, take care of self, self-responsibility, then working together with democracy, equality, equity, and then solidarity is the last. So how I get this is we do things to help ourselves, but we do it within the group. And when we make decisions what's best for the group, and we all get help. And those are the cooperative values. And I like the cooperative values, the ethical values of honesty, openness, social responsibility, and caring for others. And that's the love that we talked about earlier about what co-ops are. Okay.
Absolutely.
Ladies, we have to leave. I want to thank you very much for being on, and for everybody out there, please live cooperatively.
The preceding program was paid for by Everything Co-op.